I would say if you're doing anything at all in mixed reality, whether it's a game or productivity tool, I would always make it co-located. I don't care what it is.
Welcome to a new episode of XR and AI Spotlight, the show that gives the stage to the founders and makers pushing the boundaries of XR and AI. My name is Gabriele Romagnoli, I'm your host, and I'm here today with Steven Linton. Steven founded Fantail Games to create mixed reality games that deepen our connection with the real world, the physical environment, and our friends and family. He has worked on 40 plus games with clients including Disney, Universal, EA, and Hasbro, working across many roles including coding, design, producing, and even sales. He recently released Game Night, a multiplayer mixed reality experience with no UI and where your body is the controller. Steven is a true believer in co-located mixed reality, and in these episodes we discover why, despite that it took him so long to realize his dream of creating a co-located mixed reality experience.
I tried all of the headsets, HoloLens, HoloLens 2, Magically, all of the different ones, and I'm like, yeah, this is not quite there yet. And then the Quest 3 came out, and I was like, whoa, okay. Cool, because when you get multiple people in a room that can see each other and interact with each other physically and run around, it feels much more like playing like a sport or a board game. It's just so engaging, immersive. It was kind of obvious that that's the direction I wanted to take.
What was needed to create an MR game that anybody could pick up and play in their living room.
So we decided that we wanted our experience to feel very much like a board game, so that there would be a very natural onboarding for people who aren't gamers. And there's no menus, there's no UI, there's no text explaining anything. You just look at it and you understand it. That was a massive technical lift though, because which table is the right table in your room to put the game on? That was a big effort.
What was his biggest mistake and how playtesting came to the rescue?
Our biggest mistake has probably been, we always tend to I'm a big believer in playtesting. Just working with Disney for a long time sort of gets you into that way of thinking there. We will try and create the games as quickly as possible, sort of 1 to 2 weeks per iteration, not treat anything as precious.
And what co-located mixed reality has to offer beyond games.
The potential of productivity apps for mixed reality it's mind-blowing, the stuff that you'll be able to do, especially when they enable camera access.
But before we get into it, I wanted to thank our sponsor Meshi, who made this episode possible. Meshi is a real powerhouse for generating 3D assets with AI. You can start with a simple text or image prompt and get high-quality stylized 3D models in just a minute. There are 2 features that completely blew my mind. One is the ability to create stylized texture for any mesh, with or without UV. And the other is the ability to edit portions of AI-generated textures like in Midjourney in Painting. The team has been pushing continuous updates, improving significantly the geometry and texture quality, and I strongly encourage you to visit meshi.ai and check out the generous free plan. After that, make sure to use the code XRAI20 to get a 20% discount on your subscription. And now it's time to roll the title and welcome Steven under the spotlight. Steven, it is a real pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So, Steven, you have been experimenting with mixed reality since 2002. Reaching out, hey, I joined your newsletter. I would love to actually, I'm in this field. I see what you're doing, interesting. And I says, oh, wow, since 2002, working on mixed reality, I think we should talk. So it is a pleasure to have you here. And my first question would be, what core insight, let's say, from those early days of experimenting with mixed reality is still relevant? And what has, let's say, fundamentally changed?
Well, when I first started out, we were using, I was in the research lab at the HIT lab in Christchurch with Mark Billinghurst, and we were using 320 by 200 headsets with web camera pasted to the front. And yeah, it was low tech. Well, for the day, it was very high tech, and it was using AR markers to co-locate to different players because we were doing. Well, I ported a game. We made Worms on a big table. You could play up to 4 people, each with their own PC, try to run it, all co-located. And yeah, that was sort of the beginnings for me, and it sort of gave me a taste for what was the potential. And then over the years, I was sort of waiting for it to become mainstream so I could actually, build a proper experience that real people could play. And, I tried all of the headsets, the HoloLens, the HoloLens 2, Magic Leap, all of the different ones. And I'm like, yeah, this is not quite there yet. Your field of view is real small, or various other things, or it's just too expensive. And then the Quest 3 came out, and I was like, whoa, okay, cool. Okay, this is exactly what I want to be doing. And started Fantail Games.
So the trigger was the availability of a headset that was, let's say, had the potential to reach the mass market.
Yeah,
right?
Very much.
And was that the trigger for, let's say, okay, is it worth investing it right now? So is this more of a gamble? Because a lot of people are trying and looking into it. Some people are making mixed reality games that are mixed reality from the ground up. Some people are adding mixed reality on their games, right? So, and yet it's still a significant investment and to make something like this. Do you think it's worth investing it right now?
Well, we're about to find out because we just launched our game 2 weeks ago. So we'll learn a bit about that. We've struggled to get use information about how well the market is doing because it's just so new. There's been a whole bunch of mixed reality games come out in the last 2 weeks. Resolution, have a couple of beers, and some other really good-looking games. So I guess the jury is out on whether we'll make any money out of it. We've taken a particularly probably dangerous approach in that we're building a co-located multiplayer experience that can only be played together. But I wanted to create the best possible experience. Everyone else is taking a much more sensible approach of either adding AR to a VR experience or making sure that there's online multiplayer and all these other things. So yeah, I obviously think it's worth taking the risk because when we play test, we can see how good it is. And I think when people experience it for themselves, it'll be like, wow, this is an experience that I just can't have.
Exactly. And so let's do this. I'm going to show the short trailer of the game, and then we can get back with the next question. So, as we have seen from the trailer, this is a shared experience. It's a co-located experience. And some studios are wondering if mixed reality is a bet. But is co-located mixed reality even an even bigger bet, and why you did that in the first place?
So yeah, I guess we did a bunch of playtesting up initially when we were picking the initial games we wanted to build. We tried a bunch of stuff. And the ones that really floated to the top were the co-located multiplayer experiences, because when you get multiple people in a room that can see each other and interact with each other physically and run around, it feels much more like playing, like a sport or a board game. And it's just so engaging and so immersive that it was kind of obvious that that's the direction I wanted to take. We're a little lucky in that we have funding through our parent company to last us a little while. If we were, bootstrapping this thing ourselves, and I wouldn't have taken that risk. But but we're sort of here for the long game. I think it's worth taking the risk.
So what is right now the status of the various SDK provided by Meta? Because that is at the core of this technology. So building, you need to have these shared special anchors. How do they work right now? And maybe what tips and learning could you share with other people that are trying to implement shared collocated experiences?
Sure. So we're building in Unity. Just makes life a little bit easier. It's a little bit ahead in terms of the adoption of the tools that Meta are making. Unreal's still fine. It's just a little bit further behind. Meta have a new thing they've added 6 months ago called building blocks, which makes life really easy. You can just literally drag and drop co-location, pass through various hand tracking that you want onto your scene, and it sets it all up for you. And that'll take you to like 80%. Of course, it's a classic 80-20 rule, is that last 20% is still a lot of work. Meta release updates every month, which have anywhere from small to reasonably radical changes to the SDK. The last one in particular, they changed the hand tracking. They added a network discovery thing that we'd had to build ourselves, and we've since replaced with theirs. So they're constantly changing the SDKs, which is, I think, really great. Because it's constantly exposing new features, and it's getting better and better, more stable. Yeah, so I find it great.
And so, though, regarding that last 20%, right? So because you mentioned you can easily bring in, let's say, a certain building block from Meta. But then afterward, there is a lot of extra work. So what are some of the learnings that you had that you could share with people to simplify or to shorten that extra work, or maybe just to provide a better experience, let's say, for the user?
Sure. Well, as we usually take the path of maximum effort. So we decided that we wanted our experience to feel very much like a board game and not like a computer game, so that it would be a very natural onboarding for people who aren't gamers. Our game is casual. So we wanted it to be able to be played by kids, their parents, even their grandparents, and have everyone get in. So we took the approach of, okay, the game starts off and it puts a board game on a table in your room. Which is awesome because everyone knows what a board game is and how to interact with it. And there's no menus, there's no UI, there's no text explaining anything. You can just look at it and you understand it. That was a massive technical lift, though, because, which table is the right table in your room to put the game on? That was a big effort. Does the table actually align with so Meta give you a room scan, which you can work with. And it's got bounding boxes for tables and stuff, but that doesn't necessarily line up with real life. And if the board game is under the table, you can't press the button to start the game, and it completely falls over. So even a simple decision like that has led us to, we've probably spent a good month just doing that one little feature before we even started making games. And then every mini game that we've created has had its own set of usability challenges. Interesting ones, for example, that you wouldn't necessarily immediately think of was one of our mini games. The room fills up with water, and you grab a little fish and put it in a boat, which is very cute. Initially, we started off and the water rose throughout the duration of the game, which was a lot of fun. But for older people, there's a lot of bending down at the beginning, so it kind of hurts your back. So we fixed the water height, but that's created a new problem with people because it appeals to kids. And although the Quest is not supposed to be used by under 10-year-olds, parents do. And, you put a 5 or 6-year-old in it and they're like, that's too high. So they can't reach anything. And so introducing features like measuring the height of the player. So there's all sorts of interesting and unique, I would say, accessibility challenges. And another one that we're having a lot of trouble with is just keeping it safe. So we've got water that fills a room. The last thing you want to do is make that water too opaque and you start crashing into things. That's the whole value of mixed reality, is that you don't crash into things. And yeah, one of our games was very, very competitive. So there was a shared object that you have to hit around. And people were getting way, way too into it. They were diving across the floor and people totally forget they're wearing a headset. And it's like, okay, well, maybe we need to change the design. It's working really well in terms of the game, but it's starting to get a bit dangerous. So things that you don't necessarily think of.
I do have one question that still has to do with the room scale nature of this kind of games, right? So a lot of developers are also struggling to adapt their gameplay to different, for example, room sizes or furniture distribution. Where did you encounter that, and how did you try to solve this?
So we haven't fully solved that, I would say. Our games are designed to sort of not worry too much about where furniture is. We don't require any furniture to be there. Probably the biggest challenges we've run into are around the physical size of the room. So some people's rooms are very tiny, and that's okay. But meta support like up to, I don't know, it's like 2,000 square meters in a single room, which is like a basketball court. And yeah, we have not adapted our games to support sort of playing in a basketball court-sized room yet. But another unique challenge to work with. We're sort of picking our battles and not trying to solve too much all at the beginning. We want a lot of fun games, and if people find situations that sort of break it, we'll fix them as they bring them up. But yeah, if we try and fix every corner case, we'll just be doing that forever, not releasing any games.
There was one thing that struck me while you were talking, is that I had the impression that you did a lot of this user testing early. Can you explain it? Because I feel that many studios or teams tends to, okay, let's make this and then let's ship it. So how did you manage to keep the game at a level of complexity and polish that was still something on which you could iterate on?
Sure. I'm a big believer in playtesting. I guess working with Disney for a long time sort of gets you into that way of thinking. They're very good about that sort of thing. Playtesting is something we've done constantly throughout. I think you really have to, because if you try and go into making a mixed reality game assuming stuff from having made previous games, you're in big trouble, because none of those things are going to be true. Playtesting constantly is super important, and we will try and create the games as quickly as possible, sort of 1 to 2 weeks per iteration, and then not treat anything as precious. So, we've designed something we think is going to be amazing, and then there's usability problems, and you've got two solutions. One is completely change it or try and fix it. And usually the path of least resistance is just completely change it. There's a lot of examples I can provide where that has been the case.
So there is two elements I think that is key to user testing. One is the level of polish, or how close the product being tested is close to what is going to be the final vision. And the other part is who you test it with, right?
Sure.
So I want to first discuss the first part, right? So when we look at how close the prototype is to the final game, there are two elements at least. One is, in terms of mechanics, is the physics the same? Is the implementation of the gameplay the same? And the other is the look, right? So how polished, the shading, the 3D assets, and so on. You said that you managed to create a build 1-2 weeks. Let's even say 3. I am not sure. But then at that point, how do you manage to stick to that deadlines and adjust other gameplays or the way the 3D assets are made to have something that you would trust when testing that game?
That's a good question. So I guess because I'm mainly a coder, I do design as well. But yeah, I have a very strong focus on UX and usability. So that's my first port of call. I care more about that than the graphics. They can come later. As long as the player can interpret what's supposed to be happening, it doesn't matter if the graphics are not great. Especially with especially with what we're doing, there aren't actually a huge number of assets in the game. So the most important thing for me is that the physics feel right and people interact with it in not the way that I expect them to, but in a way that they enjoy. And then once we've solved that, once they can come in, sort of our goal was that we wanted to create a game where there's no tutorial, no instructions. They can just come in and immediately, intuitively understand it. There's a balloon in the room. I know what to do with the balloon. I hit a balloon. That's how complicated our games are. We have one mechanic, and as long we iterate until we get to the point where they understand the mechanic, and then it's time to start polish. That can take a little while depending on the game, and like I said before, in some cases we never get to the point where they can just understand it, which is fine. But yeah, we don't put a lot of effort up front in making it too glitzy. Otherwise, you're just going to be throwing all that work away potentially. And we typically work on multiple prototypes at the same time.
I just wanted to have a quick break to remind you that if you're enjoying this conversation, you should definitely check out the XR AI Spotlight newsletter. By subscribing, you will get weekly interviews like this one directly in your inbox, an app or product I personally have tested and recommend, and access to a list of over 400 mixed reality apps for Quest that you can easily search and filter. Just check the first link in the show description. And now, let's get back to the show. So, as I gather, it is about, is the core gameplay mechanic working? Does the user get it? That's the biggest. So what is the minimum thing that I can build in order to answer that questions? Does the user understand that he needs to put fishes in a net?
Yeah. Exactly.
Right? And maybe I test different water level because this time this was not working. Or sometimes I change maybe a different scoring mechanics. Where does the score appear to facilitate the understanding of that?
Yeah. Our biggest mistake has probably been we always tend to add too much. And it's a process of removal typically. It's like, oh, you come up with all these brilliant ideas. And really, like the fishing game, for example, had a lot more mechanics where you can chase and stuff. And really just people like picking up the fish. And, that's fine. We'll take away all that extra stuff. It didn't need to be there. So, yeah.
You have mentioned several times, and I think clearly targeting game night towards a casual user, right? And being a casual experience. Something that people can experience in their living room for Christmas or any, let's say, family gathering. Put on 2 headsets and let's go. Do you feel this is where mixed reality is now? Do you think that there is also a place for mixed reality for a more core gamer kind of experience?
That's a really good question. I guess my background is in more casual experiences. That's where my instinct took me. I mean, there's a lot of really cool core stuff coming out at the moment. Last Stand is really cool. Spatial Ops, very core shooters and stuff. They're great. I wanted to create an experience where the entire family can get in and enjoy it. And that, hence the name Game Night. So, yeah, I'm not sure if I've totally answered your question, but that's sort of that direction.
I think it makes a lot of sense. So there doesn't need to be very often a strategic decision behind something like this, but it's like giving that you come from the casual game, that's where your experience lies. So it's just the kind of things that we are going to build because that's what we like to build, that's what we know how to build. Sometimes I do like to, you wanted to add something?
Well, I was just going to say, I guess the Quest does have a tendency to skew more core. And there are slightly less casual experiences. We've had a lot of interest since the launch from VR arenas, and a lot of the experiences they have are like escape rooms and shooters and stuff. And they're interested in this one because it's casual. It opens up their audience to a whole new style of game that brings in more people. So, yeah.
Actually, I want to jump on that. This seems like the kind of game or experience that you can run on a location-based experience, right? So it is like maybe an arcade, right? Or like a game night, or maybe like someone that organizes events and then wants to have, let's say, a fun activity together. Have you tried that in a sense? Like, is that something that you have tried to pitch to them yet or not? How did that work out?
So yeah, that's definitely probably the safer approach for games like ours at the moment, because those places are already established. They have all the headsets, which you just can't expect people to have 2 or more headsets at home. There certainly are, but it's not a big audience. So that's the safer audience and probably the safer way of making money with this type of game right now. I hope with cheaper headsets that that becomes less sort of a case. We haven't actively chased anyone yet, but we've had, like I said, 7 people reach out to us already in the space of 2 weeks. So there's definitely a lot of enthusiasm from VR arenas, I would say. There's a lot of infrastructure I think we need to build into the games to be able to support them properly. But we'll definitely be doing that over the next little while. Because it sort of addresses 2 problems. One, it's another way of making money, which is always good because who knows. And the other one is it's a great way of just getting a lot more exposure to the game and people learn about it. And yeah, it's like, oh, we played that game at the arena, and oh, you can play it at home too. Sweet,
Right.
So it's win-win for us.
And so in that case, right, so how does the business model kind of works? Because there are people, especially for mixed reality games, that have these collaborative elements, and maybe they require bigger spaces that are set up that people might not have at home. I imagine there might be other studios that are looking at, okay, maybe we can kind of like license the game or let's say sell it to this VR arena. In that case, how does the business model work?
I'm, to be honest, still learning that myself. From my understanding, there's 3 approaches. One is licensing it to the studio, to the VR arena, and taking a cut of sort of the admission fees. One is pay per play, and one is pay per minute, which I understand is possibly the most used approach. But I'm still feeling my way out. Our goal at the moment is just to get the game out in front of consumers first. So yeah, I still need to do my homework on that one. Maybe
but that's a good start. There was another question that popped up while we were discussing about mixed reality, of course, and shared co-located casual experiences, core game experience. What about something outside of games? So I think that there is value, and especially when we move in a place where this kind of digital content can not just be inside our houses, but can also be outside. And of course, this is already something that is happening with mobile devices, right? People can have shared AR experiences on their device. But what's your take? How do you think a shared experience could benefit from mixed reality outside, for example?
I mean, Pokemon Go is probably the perfect example of how well.
Yeah, but it's another game.
Yeah, for sure. But my original pitch when I started Fantail Games was actually to make a cooking application, not a game. And my boss was like, "But you're a game developer." I was like, "Yeah, but the potential of productivity apps for mixed reality is just, it's mind-blowing, the stuff that you'll be able to do, especially when they enable camera access, which said they're going to give us. So yeah, I would say designing games is a little tricky. There's a lot of boxes that box you in. With productivity, there's just so many really obvious use cases for it that it's very exciting, and especially when it gets down to sort of the glasses, format, where you can just walk up to someone and go, "Do you want to play a game?" And you're in a field, and you're suddenly playing a variation of soccer or whatever it is. It's an exciting world. That's probably 5 years or more off, but if you're building now, you're building for this wonderful future that I can sort of see coming just around the corner, which I'm very excited about.
So you mentioned camera access, and there are many people asking or wanting for that. And you mentioned about many use cases around productivity. What are some ideas that comes to mind? Because we have heard and we have seen this idea of cooking, let's say, several times, right? And the point is that I think when that's gonna happen, that we are gonna see so many cooking app somewhere, and I think it's always important also to try to give a unique perspective. So just cooking for the practical aspect of cooking might not be, I don't know, something that interesting or innovative, especially. And I've always been thinking, for example, what could be the unique spin? Is that maybe a manga cooking app where then you cook, for example, sushi and or maybe other kind of popular dishes from famous anime series, right? I'm trying to think, because what are some of the crazy idea that might come up when you get camera access and you get this powerful device that can add any digital content on top of the real world?
I mean, the mind boggles, to be honest. The cooking application was a really good one for me because I don't like doing it. I'm constantly referring to my phone, and it's like it's turning off and go backwards and forwards, and my hands are messy, and it's just like all of those problems go away when it's on the wall next to you. I like to follow all the instructions, and it stresses me out if I'm getting instructions wrong. And it just takes all the pain out of it. But I would say anything educational will benefit from. At Cerebral Fix, we did a bunch of training things to say, like learning how to do X-rays. Obviously, they don't want to put their students in front of real X-ray machines more than they have to because they're getting exposure to X-rays. So learning that in VR or mixed reality with the actual tool, which is, I think, the difference between VR and mixed reality is you can learn on the tool, but with it off. There's a lot of power in that. And Microsoft were doing some really great stuff around that back in the day on HoloLens. Unfortunately, that's disappeared. But I would say there's huge scope for all that sort of good stuff.
I want to, let's say, start looking at one thing, and that is there is this wave of devices now, right? For example, there is, of course, the Apple Vision Pro reached the market, Quest 3S. Then there is spectacles. I don't know if you have tried them.
Yeah.
That is right. I did once at a conference, and I was actually quite impressed. And by the way, talking about shared mixed reality experiences, I was there getting this private demo, and then one of the guy from Snap says, "Okay, guys, do we want to play and do something together?" Yes. Went to his phone, click a couple of buttons, and then I seen a notification. "Hey, do you want to join?" Boom, we joined. And I was like, okay, now the digital stuff that we are drawing is going to be all over the place. Man, it was there, rock solid, multiple people there drawing. So I was actually really impressed. And that makes me keep thinking, right? Okay, maybe this technology is not as far as many people say, maybe it's closer, right? And so where do you see like the most exciting opportunities for innovation, let's say in the next 5 years, or something that is on horizon, but not too far?
Well, like you say, I think the two biggest opportunities in terms of the glasses is Snap and Meta with their Orion. I would imagine they're still quite a ways off. I would say Snap seem to be a bit closer to the finish line. They already have people using their tools. But yeah, I think when we start integrating computer vision with those glasses, that's when all the magic will happen. And obviously AI, when you can look at a thing, ask ChatGPT something about the thing, and then get an answer straight away. It's sort of kind of revolutionary, really. You've got instant answers to everything you could want to know. And to your example you just gave, I would say if you're doing anything at all in mixed reality, whether it's a game or a productivity tool or something, I would always, always, always make it co-located. I don't care what it is. The co-located experience is so motivating and exciting that you want to be able to make sure you've supported, multiple, even if it's a cooking app, sure, you don't really need an extra person to be able to use it at the same time, but when they do, the experience is just so much more
sticky.
Yeah,
magic.
Magic. Yeah, that's the right word. So that's certainly my approach to everything that we're doing. Is even if I'm designing a single player experience, we'll definitely be adding co-location to it because you could have that experience.
That's a very interesting point. And, I wonder still like how because there is the extra technical lift of building that. So of building a working shared co-located experience. And there is also like a design and purposeful. So it shouldn't feel something that is just like patched in, because then it's not magical anymore. It feels like something rushed. Right. So.
Yeah, I would say, even if it doesn't feel like the application suits it, just having multiple people work together is all of the excuse you need to have that feature. Because when, two brains come together, it creates a much more meaningful experience. Sorry, I cut you off.
So then, I mean, let's say your final pitch, so to say, right? To really encourage people and also in a way dissuade them for what could be the technical challenges. So what can you say to other developers that are thinking, oh, should we share special anchor? Should we share special anchor? Should we make this co-located or not? How can you help them decide and maybe facilitate that transition, that start building and experimenting with it?
Yeah. Like I said before, Meta have their building blocks. But yeah, it's no insignificant thing to add. You have to know how to do network multiplayer programming, and that is not straightforward. And there's all the testing overhead that adds. Our game supports X number of devices, and it's just a lot. So if I was a solo dev, I wouldn't. It's just too much. It's just a lot. And you have to be able to test it. So it's going to require more than one person to test it, and you can't always be doing playtesting. So I would do it if I've got the support of a larger team. We have 3 people, and that's just enough. But yeah, it's no small task. But Meta's tools are getting better and better every month. Like I said, in the latest update, they had a whole bunch of new spatial anchor stuff, and it's like, yep, that's something we've done 6 months ago, and thank you for adding it. It's going to make everyone else's life real easy, and it's getting better and better. So if you're doing it now, be aware you're on the bleeding edge, and be aware that all the tools are evolving and somewhat working. Certainly working enough for our purposes, but if you're used to working in other platforms like VR or mobile, they're much safer, and you're used to using tools that don't break or constantly change under your feet. So you have to be someone who's prepared to take that journey.
I mean, I think it's a fair answer, a very fair answer. Thanks, Stephen. And another extra reason for, I think one thing I've taken is to start testing early with something that is very minimal to evaluate the game mechanics. Does the user get it? Because that is going to also incredibly de-risk whatever you're building. Right. So, Stephen, I mean, thank you very much for this chat. I have 2 headsets, so I'm going to get game night and in a couple of days certainly jump in.
Awesome. Hope you have fun. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much for listening in. If you like the show, remember to leave a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or a thumbs up on YouTube. It really helps me keep doing this and shine the spotlights on the greatest founders and makers, pushing the boundaries of XR and AI. Also, make sure to check out the show page xraispotlight.com, where you can find more conversation like this one. Till next time.